Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. We are live and I would like to start today with reminding you that all the links to me, especially the locals community, that is important just in case, because you know YouTube is not the most secure place to be. Rumble, join my mailing list as well. You find down below this video also the links to Mr. Scott Ritter, who is back with me today, and I'm very grateful for Scott coming back. I will ask Scott this first. Scott, I found Scott Ritter Extra, that's your website. Then we have Rumble that I attached as well, but there is a channel that actually it's not your channel. Is a Tour of Duty channel that is still active on YouTube?
A Tour of Duty is the original channel, YouTube channel put together by Jeff Norman. We're back on YouTube, but it's a very strange thing because we're back, but we're not back. We can broadcast, but and so, you know, it's there. I guess when I have to say that I'm not the perfect person to ask it. Jeff Norman is, but I mean, we have made a decision. It's not a good business decision, but it's a good moral decision that we're sticking with Rumble because Rumble doesn't censor. Rumble is good, but we, you know, we have a great YouTube audience. I mean, that's the thing. It's not the platform; it's the audience. We have this fantastic YouTube audience that, for whatever reason, they can't automatically transfer over to Rumble. We don't want to lose this audience. We love them. And so we are, I guess, doing some broadcasting. I guess we start the show by broadcasting on YouTube through the U.S. Tour of Duty channel. Then we just go over to Rumble completely. As I said, Jeff is he's the real brains behind this enterprise, and he knows all the little things that he's doing back there. I simply show up, turn on the computer, and talk. All the other stuff that happens is between Jeff. But we're back on YouTube, and so it is the U.S. Tour of Duty channel that does it. Also, even though the Scott Ritter show, which was a collaboration I had with Soloviev Live, that YouTube channel was shut down. I continue to record these interviews, and then we stream them on Rumble every Wednesday night. I think at again, Jeff, no, I think it's at 6 p.m. Eastern. But so that project is still going. It's just been transferred to the Rumble channel because the YouTube channel was shut down.
Thank you, Scott. So all those links, guys, you find right down below our live stream, already attached, and Scott's main page, Scott Ritter Extra, everything is there. So just sign up there and it takes you, right, everything is right there. Scott, how much time do we have today? Because I didn't ask you before. Half an hour, 1 hour, 40 minutes?
As much time as you need.
Okay, thank you. God bless. 5 questions. And let's go with my order because sometimes I just jump to a different number. What will the end of the war look like between Ukraine and, well, the collective West?
Well, in order to answer what the end of the war looks like, we have to define what the war is. And it's not just the special military operation that Russia launched on February 24th. This war is a larger struggle between Russia and the collective West, and I think the parameters of a Russian victory are linked to the 2 draft treaties that Russia submitted, one to NATO, one to the United States, on December 21st, 2021, 17th, I think, December 17th, 2021, that talked about basically a new European security framework. And so this war won't be over until a new European security framework has been hammered out, but because only then will there be peaceful coexistence. Anything less than that means that Russia will be in a perpetual state of conflict with NATO. It may not be a hot war like it's being fought right now in Ukraine, but a perpetual state of conflict means that NATO and the European Union can stick their fingers in every conflict on the periphery of Russia. For instance, if you think that what's happening between Armenia and Azerbaijan today is not related to what's happening in Georgia, which is not related with what's happening in Ukraine, you're high. It's all related. It's all about the West seeking to weaken Russia by promoting conflict on the border regions with Russia. The fact that President Biden met with what's called the C5+1 during the General Assembly in the week in New York, it means that the United States is looking to Central Asia to stir the pot up in Central Asia to exacerbate anti-Russian sentiment there, maybe create some sort of conflict that drains Russian resources away. And now in the post visit of Kim Jong-un, you see the United States trying to stir up trouble in the Pacific region as well. It will never end until Russia, the United States, and Europe hammer out what the delineation of spheres of influence are. I mean, it's funny how the United States say Russia is not allowed to have a sphere of influence, but we are. And what Russia's saying is, no, we do have a sphere of influence. It's a real one. It's one worthy of our history and such. And Ukraine is in that sphere of influence. We will not allow Ukraine to become part of NATO, ever. That's an existential issue. They will not allow Georgia to become part of NATO, ever. And they won't let Armenia become part of NATO, ever. But the West continues to believe that Russia's weak, that Russia can be exploited. So, and then here's another aspect to that question. We take a look at, for instance, Jan Stoltenberg and I think the defense ministers of the United Kingdom and Germany. I think could be Germany or France. My brain is hiccuping right now. But there's two defense ministers from NATO countries and Jan Stoltenberg in Kiev today. And basically, they got up there and they said that this war won't end until Ukraine's 10-point peace plan has been implemented. And of course, that means that Russia returns to the 1991 borders, that they turn over to the International Criminal Court, which means this war won't end until the last Ukrainian. That's a fact. And this, we see people like Douglas McGregor saying things that I agree with fundamentally, that Ukraine's counteroffensive has failed, that Ukraine is going to go over into the defensive, which means that they're going to need longer range systems to strike Russia. And therefore, I think one thing that Jan Stoltenberg and the other two defense ministers are doing is talking about, and it might be the German defense minister, because I think they're talking about the provision of the Taurus air-launched cruise missile, which Ukraine believes it needs to carry out strategic strikes into the depth of Russia, along with the ATACMS missile that the United States is providing. And so there will be continued provocations, such as what had happened when Ukraine, using NATO intelligence and NATO weapons, struck the Black Sea Fleet headquarters in Sevastopol, and continued attacks against the Crimea Bridge. This will continue, and there's many Russians that are frustrated by this. They feel embarrassed by this, humiliated by this, and they're demanding that Russia respond by hitting so-called decision-making centers inside Ukraine. This would be the Ministry of Defense. This would be the presidential palace. This would be the parliament, things of that nature. And Russia's restraint, many people find it embarrassing. They're just like, this is a humiliation for Russia. But those are short-term, emotionally driven, beliefs. You said, what does this war look like when it ends? Well, here's a fundamental question. For all those Russians out there who have shouted from the top of their lungs that Russia and Ukraine are brothers, you're brother Slav nations, that the problem with Ukraine isn't the Ukrainians. The problem with Ukraine are the Banderas who've been empowered by Europe to infect Ukraine. But that at the end of the day, Ukrainians and Russians are Slavs. They have shared relatives, shared culture, shared history, et cetera, et cetera. If you believe that, then how do you want your brother's house to look when this war is over? Because you just told me he's your brother. And if he's your brother and you believe your brother's under bad influence, do you want to deal with that influence, or do you want to punish your brother? Do you want to destroy your brother's house, burn it to the ground? Because there's a lot of people out there right now saying that Russia needs to take down all the trains, take down the rail tunnels, take down the bridges, take down the roads, take down the infrastructure. And that sounds good. I mean, most of the people saying that aren't military people, by the way. They're civilians who are just frustrated and angry. But let's say you do all that. This is the Ukraine you claim as your brother. And now you're going to tear down its infrastructure, and the war is going to end. And I believe the war ends with a decisive Russian victory. But now Russia doesn't just defeat the Ukrainian military, it's going to replace the current Banderist-leaning government with a government that now is going to allegedly work hand in glove with Russia moving forward. But how can you work hand in glove with Russia when Russia just destroyed your home? When Russia destroyed everything, there's nothing left. It has to be rebuilt. And who's going to rebuild it? And I know there's a lot of Russians out there that say, not us, we ain't rebuilding it. Yes, you are. You are, because it's your brother's house. And Russia can't live with a cancerous Ukraine. Just like Russia won't allow the Banderas to stay in power, Russia can't allow a destroyed Ukraine to fester, because who are the Ukrainians going to blame for the destruction? Russia. And you claim you want to improve relations with the Ukrainians post-conflict, but you've just created the conditions where tens of millions of Ukrainians will forever condemn you for the harm that's befallen them today. So this war, I believe, ends with the strategic defeat of the Ukrainian army. This war ends with the political defeat of the Zelensky government. And this war ends when, Russia and Ukraine find a common basis of relationship. And I think this will be dictated to the Ukrainians by the Russians. I don't know if you hear that squeaking in the background, but my dog has found a squeaky toy, so he's going crazy. I apologize for that.
No, Maverick, always welcome. If you want to show him, please.
Well, he's chewing away at that toy. So,
no problem.
But
you can show Maverick's cat. People love him, so no problem. But continue, please. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I look at some of your comments. Tiger, Cyber, Hannes, that's BS from Scott. Look at Germany, who destroyed. Did Germany and Russia consider themselves to be brothers? I think I know the history a little bit better than you by your comment. All right. Germans and Russians were never brothers. Russia never considered Germany to be a fundamental part of Russia. They don't have shared cultural, linguistic, religious background. So pound sand. I shouldn't read comments. My wife tells me not to read comments, but I did.
But you just became my moderator without, That's great. Thank you so much. I'm trying to read all of the comments, but anyway. Scott.
Yeah, but my point is this war will end in a way that's dictated by Russia. We see the West trying their best to destroy Ukraine, literally destroy, because the West doesn't care about Ukraine at all. Russia does. So I think the end of this conflict is going to be complicated by the fact that Russia not only has to fight the Ukrainians, it has to fight the West, who's trying to destroy Ukraine. So Russia is trying to defeat Ukraine and preserve Ukraine at the same time.
Mm-hmm. On your last show with Judge Napolitano, you were describing the situation when Zelensky has to sign the peace agreement. And this is my second question, because I don't really imagine Zelensky signing this peace document. What I imagine is a continuation of the war with involvement, use of other countries. But if there is a peace concluded, what do those relations between Russia and United States look like afterwards? Before I give you voice here, Scott, just one thing I want to bring to everyone's attention. And let me open this here. We have election in Poland coming on October 15th. And right after the election, what's gonna happen, everyone? Buckle up, because the Ministry of National Defense has given the dates of the next year military qualifications. We're gonna have 230,000 people who have to go through the commissions. to be fully ready to be a soldier. And this will include people, I will put this tomorrow in my video, more specifics, but young men aged from 20 to 24, born in 2000 and 2004, and as well as the ladies, everyone. Ladies who were born from 1997 until 2005. So this is my second question here. As Zelensky's ego, I mean, he's completely lost in this. I think he kept playing his part so intensely that he lost completely sense of who he is. There are so many identities this man was identifying himself as, I believe, that now I think this is like the soul already out of the body. We don't know who this is anymore. How this gonna look like if they extend this war, if they involve more countries, Scott? Hi, Maverick. If they involve more countries, and as I just said, Poland is going to have 230,000 people, young men and young women, to be ready, to be in the uniform.
Well, let's start off by pointing out to Poland that Ukraine's lost 400,000, so you don't got enough. I just want to point that out to Poland. You can mobilize 230,000. You don't have enough. Russia just killed 400,000. They're going to kill another 200, 300,000 before this is done. You ready to sacrifice that, Poland? You ready? You're not. So stop pretending you are. I mean, that because this is all pretense. This is all done for domestic political consumption. Poland's not going to war with Russia. They know they can't win a war with Russia. Poland's starting to realize that they can't rely upon the West. I think one of the whole things that's coming out in this election, and you can correct me anytime I'm wrong, please raise your hand and say, shut up, Scott, you don't know what you're talking about, because I am not pretending to be an expert in Polish domestic politics. But my understanding is that the European Union and the collective West are very unhappy with the current Polish government, that they would prefer Mr. Tusk to become the leader of Poland. That's I'm wrong?
Scott, they are all playing the same game. It just looks different from the outside.
Well, from the outside, it looks like they're betting on Tusk, that they're concerned that that the current Polish government, whose political party I can't pronounce, I think, though, they have the initials
Law
PI.
and justice.
Justice, right. Well, I mean, in Poland, I couldn't pronounce it. But there's a more right-wing, smaller party that is dominating this election by insisting on shutting down grain shipments and closing the borders to Ukrainians and all that. So this is all wrong too. This is why I have you on.
No, this is another illusion created to get more voters. Okay.
And who's creating the illusion? The opposition or the government?
Both. There is no single party at this. Okay. The illusion is this. Right before the election, well, the same party that now, let's go from the back to the same party now that is not allowing Ukrainian grain, the same party that is now saying that we stand for Polish farmers, is the very party that never asked Polish citizens when they allowed over 5 million of Ukrainian refugees to enter and pay them and support them and ignore Polish citizens. This is the same party. This is the party that allowed that grain to stack up all those places where there was no room for the grain from Polish farmers. They are right before the election, and they will twist and turn in every way possible to make people believe that they care, that they are for them. They will do anything to create the illusion that actually they are anti-European Union, they are for Poland. This is not right, how you say it? They are not conservative. There is no such a thing. It's the same like in United States, Scott, right? Like you have Democrats and you have Republicans, which we know at the end of the day is the same thing. It's just different shades, because they don't care for the citizens. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, I'm not saying everyone, but overall, behind the scenes, they do exactly the same. So thinking that Platforma Obywatelska, so the party that Donald Tusk is a leader of, is better, is an illusion. It's not. Actually, the Prime Minister of Poland, Morawiecki, used to be the advisor of Tusk before. So you see how this goes. This is all connected. But I'm like, I don't want to take away from this show again. It's very.
No, what you just did, what you did was just perfect. And I'll tell you why. Because as I said going in, when I talk about Polish politics, it's not like I'm talking about weapons of mass destruction or military art or Russia, et cetera. I'm like everybody else out there. I'm like your audience, as ignorant as the day is long about this topic. And so I read up on it, but I'm a prisoner to available sources. So I'll read the Financial Times, I'll read mainstream media, I'll touch upon some things, but I don't have all day to study Polish politics. I did so. I spent a couple hours studying before this meeting with you because I knew you were going to ask me questions about Poland. So I tried to get up to speed, but it's a superficial knowledge and a superficial expertise. And yet I read a lot. My brain works. So I started to organize my thoughts based upon the data I had received. And yet, literally less than 5 minutes into this conversation, you, somebody who knows, has swept it away. And what this is showing is how difficult it is in this modern day and age for outsiders to have informed positions about, complicated problems inside. So I thought that this was fascinating. I don't mind being on the receiving end of being told you don't know what you're talking about. I freely admit I don't know what I'm talking about. But I think this is a useful exercise because I think a lot of people in the audience are saying, we don't know what we're talking about either. And we come to programs like this to get the information. So thank you, Anya, for setting me straight and helping better inform your audience.
No, thank you, Scott. But this is very, very confusing situation, even to people who live in Poland. And this is coming from someone who is absolutely not political expert. I'm not. I'm just watching this and making sense of, trying to make sense and see the truth behind all those illusions that they present to people. Those are the same people who have been in power, Scott. I don't remember exactly. Law and Justice, I think it's 10 years now, 9 years or so. And they are acting as if they are fighting for the first time for those positions. They had a lot of time to do certain things. At the end of the day, to narrow it all into one, we have election. They will perform the Circus du Soleil now. So everyone is watching and it's like, yes, it's gonna be good. They promise this, they promise that. After the election, full steam ahead. They didn't buy this military equipment, borrowing those money, especially lately, I didn't even report on this, from United States, another loan, not just from Korea, for nothing. They buy this stuff for something. They create those laws, 230,000 people, to put through this commissions and check them if they are able to be in the army. They do it for something, Scott, you know this. This is not just like because they are in the mood. So doesn't matter who, there is only one, and it's not a party actually, it's a movement. And I said this before many times talking to you. Ruch dobrobytu I pokoju. It's the movement for prosperity and peace. This is not a party, it's a movement of people, Polish citizens who are done with this BS. They are done with this. There is no party in Poland right now that can actually make any change. End of story. I don't care. I don't even read this live chat right now. What you're gonna say, full respect. I know what I know. That's it. So, Scott,
well, but the interesting thing is, right now the entire world is focused on statements made by the Polish government about the possible stoppage of flow of weapons from Poland to Ukraine. Now, What you're saying is we can't trust that statement. We can't trust anything that what it appears to be may not be what it is. That once this election's over, all bets are off.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah.
Well, then people will really see in a very fast speed of light, what they stand for. I really have a feeling after the election, people are going to see like boom, 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 boom. What's going on? Just wait until November and you will see. Scott, so my question here, this was about if there is such a moment, which is really hard for me to envision, that there is this table, we have Zelensky, we have other leaders, there's a peace document, they're signing this. If that happens, how the relationships between Russia and United States look afterwards? How is going to be?
Well, let's put it this way. If Zelensky's at the peace table signing a document, then we're all screwed because it won't be a genuine peace, because it'll be an incomplete peace. It'll be a peace where Russia compromised. And the moment Russia compromises, that's a show of weakness to the West, to the United States, and we'll never, ever stop pressing, because once we're convinced that we can expose Russian weaknesses and to exploit these Russian weaknesses, we'll continue to press. And look, if let's say your scenario is true, how did Zelensky get to that table? By America being willing to sacrifice 500,000 Ukrainian men. So it shows you to the depths to which we'll sink to accomplish a momentary, diplomatic negotiating advantage over the Russians. The Russians know this. So this is why Zelensky won't be the one signing those documents. I believe Zelensky's on the way out. I think we're looking at the beginning of the political collapse of the Zelensky regime. There was a fascinating interview that his wife gave to 60 Minutes. Let me put it this way. You're in Poland right now and you're in the midst of a national election, right? And is President Duda, is he married?
Yes.
Okay, he has a wife. And so can you imagine right now in the middle of this election, she gets on TV. Now, if she's interviewed, she's going to say, he's doing a great job. Our family's all behind him. Poland is united. We're positive about the future, right? That's what a spouse of a politician does. What did Zelensky's wife say? I'm not certain that the Ukrainian people want him to be the president. We're not sure whether or not this is the right role for us. We'll make very negative, which tells me that there's big problems in Ukraine. You talked about Zelensky. Let's just be honest who he is. He's an actor. He's a comedian, but he's an actor. And he's a good actor. He played a heck of a role in Servant of the People. That was in my opinion, that was a brilliant series. But we also now know that Servant of the People was a psychological operation run by British intelligence together with Kolomoisky to promote this comedian into a figure of national prominence capable of challenging Petro Poroshenko on the national stage. Zelensky's job was never to think. His job was always to read a script. And the script has been written by his British intelligence and CIA handlers. Let's put it this way. Season 1 of Zelensky, the new Winston Churchill, was a smashing success from Zelensky's perspective. Man, he won the world over. He started off, with the greatest line ever spoken by a leader during modern wartime. I don't need ammunition. I don't need a ride. I need more ammunition. Do you remember that line? Early on, someone said, hey, Zelensky, somebody might want to offer him a ride out of Kiev to save his life. I don't need a ride. I need ammunition. Came a t-shirt, a slogan, everywhere. But he never said it, ever. Those words were uttered by a CIA officer at the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, and the U.S. government has admitted it afterwards. But at the moment, it was attributed to Zelensky, who was uncomfortable with the role he was given. But now that a script had been created, a narrative had been put in, he stepped into it. He started wearing this olive green nonsense, walking around posturing as if he's some sort of weightlifter, and playing a role. He goes and speaks before the British Parliament. Winston Churchill type speech. I mean, Churchillian language. You think he wrote that? You think Volodymyr Zelensky, an actor with no political science background, I know he's got a law degree, but he's not this kind of guy. He didn't write that. It was written by the British because it was a British audience. He spoke to U.S. Congress. You think he wrote that speech? Absolutely not. The State Department, the CIA wrote that speech because he's delivered to an American political audience. The idea is he's speaking to the American people to generate support, so he has to say all the right things. And man, season 1 is great. He's awesome. People are just like, yeah, Zelensky's the man. But the problem with innovative seasons, innovative shows, the first season's always good. The second season, they have trouble living up to the expectations. The writing isn't as clever. It gets stilted, and the character starts to dry out. People lose interest, and that's where we're at right now. We're having a very difficult season 2. The season's about to be canceled because nobody's buying into his nonsense anymore. He went to the United Nations General Assembly, spoke to an empty hall. He came to the U.S. Congress. They wouldn't let him address a joint session of Congress. And then the ultimate insult is he goes to Canada. And, Canada for the last several decades has been hiding the fact that it is literally a Nazi stronghold, that they allowed all these Nazis to come in, all these Ukrainian Nazis to come in, and they just integrated them into their society, and they let them percolate to the top. The deputy prime minister is a Nazi, Chrystia Freeland, a Nazi, a Banderist, embracing Nazi. They all are, but they all deny it because they rewrote the history, they softened it all up and everything. That scab was ripped off in public when they stood up and they gave a standing ovation to a Nazi. Now, he's 98 years old. I know we're not supposed to speak ill of the elderly, but there is no statute of limitations for murder. And this man was part of a unit that from 1943 to 1945 murdered Jews, Poles, civilians, bayoneted them, burned them, gouged out eyes, did horrible things. I think it's the Slovakians. I'm pretty sure that his unit was responsible for brutally suppressing civilian unrest in the Slovakian areas in 1944. Not a nice guy, but they stood up and they applauded him, and everybody's cheering and everything. And now they're trying to say it was a mistake, that it was the initiative of the speaker. I've spoken at the Canadian Parliament. I know how I was vetted to get in there just to speak to a Canadian, to the Foreign Affairs Committee. Now you have 2 heads of state there, Justin Trudeau and Zelensky. I can guarantee you that nobody got in that building unless they had their name vetted by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and by Canadian intelligence. Everybody was vetted. They knew. Plus, this was a scripted event. They knew where he was. The camera panned over. The speaker had something there. You don't ad lib in front of the head of state. Everything was scripted. And Trudeau's up clapping. Zelensky's giving the fist. I mean, this was, a made-for-TV moment. And then they met with the guy afterwards. You don't get an audience with heads of state spur of the moment. It's all cleared in advance. And so this was all approved. Everybody knew about this, which means that Canada has been apologizing for Nazis and covering up for Nazis for decades. And now the whole world knows it. And this is bad look for Zelensky because he's been trying to convince people that Ukraine's not a Nazi state. It is a 100% Nazi state, 100% Nazi state. And now the whole world knows it, and they identify Zelensky as the head of this Nazi state. So that's why Zelensky will not be at any surrender table. It'll be somebody else. Zelensky is going to collapse in the near future. That's my prediction. Whether he is killed or whether he steps aside, he finally gets that ride that people said he should have taken back in February, March of 2022. It's over for Zelensky. And whoever replaces him will be the ones standing at that surrender table. And now that we've defined it this way, what we're talking about is a total Russian victory, that Russia will dictate the outcome of the conflict in Ukraine. And if that's the case, now we have the United States and Europe saying we can't win. We didn't win. There is no Russian weakness. And so the question now is, do we pull back and continue to try and press the Russians, or do we accept reality and try to adapt to this reality? The United States is in the pull back, regroup, and continue to press the Russians mode. Europe, I believe, will be in the mode of we need to talk about how we repair relations with Russia. And you already have numerous European leaders saying just that. When this war ends, we're going to have to learn how to live with Russia. Russia will still be here. And now what they're realizing is when this war ends, they're going to have to learn how to live with a victorious Russia. And I think you're going to see a difference between what Europe is thinking collectively and what the United States thinks. And the peace is going to be a very a difficult peace to bring about, but there will be a transition period after the conflict. While Russia is trying to repair Ukraine, you'll see a transition as Europe gradually comes to the realization that they have to learn how to peacefully coexist with Russia, not how to create new Iron Curtain, a new Cold War.
Thank you so much for this explanation. There are a few things here I want to mention. You just jumped into my next question, actually, with the situation in the Canadian Parliament. But before we go there, I have a little bit different question regarding this. When you brought up that interview with Zelensky's wife and the way how she presented the next elections, I had this thought, perhaps he might resign.
He might resign?
He might resign. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He might resign, because if she's approaching this in such a way, it's like preparing the ground for resignation. So that would be, in a way, the easiest way for him to get out of it and say, you know, I've tried my best and the support and this and that, and he's backing away from all of this. It's just, maybe I'm wrong, but I had this feeling about situation in Canadian Parliament. You talk about it, I talk about it on my channel. Very recently, Polish Minister of Education and Science, his name is Przemysław Czarnek, posted on his Twitter that Poland has taken steps towards the possible extradition of this person from Canada, which makes really, you know, the paperwork, the legal stuff is not even gonna happen. But what I was thinking about here, Scott, is a few things. First of all, this took place one day before Yom Kippur, okay? Let me just see.
No, I'm listening. I'm listening.
Yes, yeah. This took place one day before Yom Kippur. And I'm under the impression here, they did this intentionally because this is spiritual war. They are fighting with, this is evil versus God. This is the fight between good and evil. They did this one day before Yom Kippur. I didn't know about this holiday exactly what it is, but it looks like, you might tell me, this is the holiest day in Judaism and Samanitarism. And they did this punch in people's face one day before this holiday. So I think there's another reason why this took place. It's on a deeper level, on like a spiritual level here, to really affect people's spirit. It's like snap in your face. But I would like to ask you this. Who do you think, whose idea was it for that Nazi man to be in that parliament, to be honored? Who came up with this?
Chrystia Freeland. Chrystia Freeland's a Nazi. She's a Ukrainian Nazi, a Western Ukrainian Nazi. Her grandfather was a Nazi propagandist in the city of Krakow. And when he came over to Canada, Chrystia Freeland, when she became a journalist, took the lead in trying to whitewash his background, to redefine who he is, just like all Ukrainians sought to redefine who they are, so they're not, so the world doesn't see them as they are, Nazi supporters. I mean, if you support Stepan Bandera, you're a Nazi. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Oh, he's just a misunderstood Ukrainian nationalist. No, he's a Nazi. So is Roman Shushkevich. So are the others. Horrible people, disgusting people, despicable people. Just so, again, I shouldn't read the comments, but I did. That's what I was Googling. I mean, sorry, Scott, you're an idiot. I agree. I'm an idiot. There's no debate there. So quit telling people what's obvious to everybody. I admit I'm an idiot. But I'm an idiot who knows a couple things. You said there's only 110,000 Azov Nazis, and that doesn't define the military. You know how many soldiers? This is what I had to Google. How many soldiers were in the Wehrmacht in the Second World War? The Wehrmacht, of course, was fighting for Nazi Germany, a Nazi regime. 13.6 million. You know how many Waffen SS, that is the hardcore Nazi soldiers there were? They had 20 divisions. The average size of a division was 7,000. But let's just say it's 10,000. 20 times 10 gets you what? 200,000? Let's call it 500,000. So 500,000 hardcore Waffen SS Nazi types, that's a high number, by the way, versus 13.6 million regular German soldiers. Please don't spout numbers unless you know what the hell you're talking about, okay? Please don't do that because it only shows your stupidity. I may be an idiot, but you're stupid and your ignorance is costing people their lives. If you don't understand how 110,000 fanatic murderers can be leveraged into political power, then you understand nothing about what's going on in Ukraine today. Do you know that the Azov thinking people have taken over the Ministry of the Interior? They've taken over the police. So it's not just the soldiers we're talking about. We're talking about the people day-to-day interacting with Ukrainian citizenry, the intimidation factor that's put into that. They've taken over Boy Scouts. There's only one scouting regiment allowed in Ukraine today, and that's the Banderist-affiliated scouting program. And they brainwashed them from the very beginning. You have no clue what you're talking about. Zelensky is a Nazi-supporting Jew. Now, I know people will say, oh, Jews can't support Nazis. They do, they did, they are. Why is the Anti-Defamation League, big Jewish organization, by the way, supporting what's going on in Ukraine today? I mean, here we are talking about Yom Kippur, talking about spirituality. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in Israel, and I've been to the WWII, Holocaust Museum. In Israel, they every year they stop and the whistle blows. Everybody gets out of their car and they hold their heads down in remembrance of the dead from the Holocaust. Never again is the term they say all the time. Never again, never again, never again, except apparently in Ukraine. Then it's all bets off. What does never again mean to a Jew? It should mean never again. But apparently for the ADL and for American Jewish organizations, for European Jewish organizations, for Ukrainian Jewish organizations, it means it's going to happen again. Because let me remind you what the reality is. All these Nazis that have taken over, you know what they believe in their heart of hearts? That all Jews must die. All Jews must die. Right now, Zelensky is simply a Jew being used by the Nazis to empower them. But if they have their way, if they win this war, they will purge him, all Jews, all non-Western Ukrainian types from the nation. They believe in the purity of the Ukrainian DNA. And you can't allow Russian blood, Polish blood, again, for all the Polish people out there, you guys do know. I mean, you should know. Volin, do I need to say it again? Volin, I'll say it one more time. Volin, they hate you. They despise you. They view you as subhumans. They took pride in bayoneting your women, gouging the eyes out of your children, smashing their heads against tree trunks for fun. And now you're going to sit here and tell me that Zelensky's not a Nazi and there's no Nazi element in Ukraine. Pound sand. Go to hell, because you're the problem. You are literally empowering evil. So I apologize for losing it, but it's
no, but that's exactly what people need to hear.
As a person said, what does Volin mean? Let me tell you what Volin is an area, a region. It used to be part of eastern Poland. It was incorporated into western Ukraine, but it was a place that had a mixed Polish-Ukrainian population. Now, I'll be the first one to admit that the history of Volin, the Volin region, is a complicated history. I'm writing about it right now. And what happened after World War I with the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the collapse of the Tsarist Empire, and how nations were trying to reconfigure themselves, Volin got sort of caught in the middle. And it was, 1 minute it was part of the Western Ukrainian Republic, then it became part of the Ukrainian People's Republic, then it became part of Poland and all this stuff. So you can understand there's a certain amount of schizophrenia amongst the population there. And there was animosity between the Polish and the Ukrainian populations there. But they tried to settle things down during the period of time, when Poland was an independent nation before it got partitioned between the Germans and the Soviets. There was a time where things started to settle down. There was some return to normalcy. The bloodlust that had raised its head in the 1920s had been quieted down. But then Stepan Bandera came in. And Bandera is a man who said that he will kill thousands to get a Ukrainian state. And the Ukrainian state is defined by the purity of the Ukrainian people. They couldn't live side by Poles. They couldn't stand. There's a wonderful movie. It's a horrible movie, but it's a wonderful movie. What I mean is educational. I think it's called Bolin. It's a Polish movie. And you see at the beginning of the movie, there's I think it was a Ukrainian guy came to a Polish village to marry a Polish girl. And they have the big wedding ceremony and he takes her away. But later on in the movie, the Banderas come in and they kill all the Poles. But and the reason why is they couldn't allow this intermingling because the Poles were subhuman. And worse than the Poles were the Jews who got hunted down and slaughtered. Volyn is the region. In 1943, in July 1943, the Banderas planned and executed a murderous pogrom, they could call it, that's normally associated with Jews, but in this case it was with the Poles. Instantly, I think overnight, the first night, they killed like 20,000 people. They just came into the villages and butchered them all in the most horrific ways. Then over the course from 43 to 44, they ended up killing 110,000 Poles. That's what Volyn is. Volyn is the epitome. It defines the Banderas movement because it's all about bloodlust, killing people, slaughtering people to ensure an ethnically pure Western Ukrainian state. And that mindset exists in Ukraine today.
After the World War II ended, Scott, there was a trial in Nuremberg. What really happened with those Nazis? Some of them went to, I don't have this question here, this is just coming now. Some of them went to Argentina, they escaped to Argentina. Now it looks like many of them escaped to Canada. Where did they go, Scott? What happened to those people?
Well, the reality is very few Nazis were held to account. I mean, the Russians and the Poles who were occupied by the Nazis did a better job of bringing Nazis to justice. The Poles were still kicking the stools out from underneath Nazis in 1946, 47, 48, 49. The Russians, the Soviets were likewise. I mean, one of the most gratifying scenes, and again, I apologize when I say this because people will be like, well, you're supposed to be pro-peace, Scott. Well, I am to an extent, but sometimes there's a need for violence. One of the most gratifying scenes is when a Soviet court finds, I forget how many it was, a large number of Nazis guilty of the crimes that they committed while occupying the city of Kiev. And the city of Kiev is literally destroyed, but they cleared out the plaza. And all around the plaza, it's full of tens of thousands of the survivors of Nazi occupation. And they're all just standing there silently. And they bring the Nazis out from the courtroom. They found them guilty. They put them on trucks and they bring them out. And then they back the trucks up to this gallows, a long gallows, and they put the rope around each one of their heads. And on signal, the trucks drive away and all the Nazis fall down and they hang. There's no cheering. It's just everybody looking at them saying, hang, you bastards, hang, because they knew what they did to them. They knew the crimes they committed. That's what justice is when you have crimes committed to the level that Nazi Germany committed against Poland, against Russia, against Ukraine, against Belarus. But in the West, you see, we had a problem because our problem was the Soviet Union. And we needed, there was a plan called the Morgenthau Plan. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was put out by President Roosevelt's, I think, Secretary of the Treasury. And it was, what do we do about Nazi Germany? What do we do about Germany? Because, the feeling was that Germany can't be allowed to have a strong nation with an industry that is capable of being militarized. That what we have to do is strip away their industry, take away their mines, and leave just a rump agrarian state. And all the Germans would be good for is growing wheat. That was the Morgenthau plan. And some people believe that it would have cost Germany millions of lives, that we would have starved them to death, we would have stripped away, we would have, the idea was just to kill Germans until we had a German state that was manageable. But then the Soviets came along and the Morgenthau plan went away because we said, we need Germany. We need German industry. Ask yourself about companies like Krupp. It's a major weapons manufacturer. How many Krupp executives hung by the neck until dead for building the German war machine? No middle of the road Nazi paid a price. They all were allowed to reabsorb into German society. Many Nazis were taken away to the United States to build our space program. We forgave all sins, apparently. Gehlen, a German general who ran the intelligence organization in the East and who was running Banderist groups behind the lines in the Soviet Union, his entire Eastern European intelligence unit was brought in under the umbrella of the Americans, the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which became the CIA in 1947. They converted it into the German intelligence organization. So the German intelligence organization, just so everybody knows this, B&D, is a Nazi organization. Everybody who worked for them in the early days were Nazis. They worked for the CIA, and their job was to run Banderist Nazis behind the lines in Ukraine. That's what happened to the Nazis. You had the 14th Galician Division of the Waffen-SS, formed in 1943, went to combat in 44, surrendered in 1945 to the British, and immediately, the Russians are saying, "Bring them here, guys. We have a couple empty nooses that we want to put their necks in," as they should have. Kill them all. I'm sorry. If you're a Nazi and you committed crimes, you die. You don't get rehabilitated. You get killed. But nope. Instead, what we did is we covered up for them, and they were flown to the United Kingdom. They were flown to Canada. They were flown to the United States. They were dispersed. We never denazified West Germany. Never denazified West Germany. And as a result, we have a German society that, again, I don't want to condemn all Germans because that's the wrong thing to do. But I'll say this. In 1977, my family moved to West Germany. We lived in a little village called Charlottenbach, tiny little village. And if you went to the village cemetery, they had a number of crosses on there that just said missing in the East. They had the name missing in the East. So you had a whole cemetery full of crosses that said missing in the East. That meant dude died over there, ain't coming back. So they knew war. They knew the cost of war. They knew the consequences of war. And it was a wonderful place. I mean, you walked down, they had a church, the bells rang all the time. It was beautiful, clean German village, bakery, chocolate shop, the whole thing. And I made some German friends. I remember once we were out kicking the soccer ball around because I didn't know how to play soccer. I was trying to teach them football, but American football. They're like, no, we want to kick this round ball around. So I'm trying to learn that skill set. And it gets dark, and the German mom comes out and shouts, dinner, dinner, dinner. He's like, why don't you come home and eat? So I came home and eat, and they introduced me as the American, and I don't speak any German. He speaks regular English, so it was very, sitting around the table, I'm eating a nice little German meal. And then the family disperses, and he and I are together. So he takes me down to the basement. Now, you've heard of man caves. You know the concept of a man cave. It's where, testosterone-laden men like to sit down and put their sports stuff around. Well, there was a man cave downstairs, but it was a Nazi man cave. It was a Nazi man cave. It had the Nazi flag. It had all the medals. It had the photographs of the war. It's where I believe the grandfather had preserved the memory of the Second World War. Little museum of his role in the war. It was there. And when the father found out that the kid had taken me down, I was ushered out of the house and never invited back in. We had a German gardener, a wonderful lady, an older lady. because we moved from Schlotenbach to a small little village in Marnheim. And it was a village, it was the house that had a reputation because when Patton rolled through that area, the Rhine-Pfalz area, he made that home his headquarters for a number of days during the campaigns that were being fought in and around Kaiserslautern. And the landowner had ever since then rented the house out to Americans. So it was a very popular house. It had a swimming pool, big garden, very nice. And my dad had put his name on the list, and we got the phone call. Hey, house is ready. Other Americans are moving out. You want to move in? Heck yeah. So we move into that house, and it came with a gardener. She'd been with the family since World War II. And she was a wonderful little lady and all that. But at that time, there was a show that came out. I think this would have been in 1978, The Holocaust. It was a 10-part series. It was played on German TV, or 4-part series. I can't remember how many parts it was. But all I remember is that the entire nation shut down when the show was on. And at the end of the show, they had a panel of psychologists to try and explain to the German youth what the hell they just saw, because they hadn't been told about this. The kids my age hadn't been told about the Holocaust, hadn't been told about what mommy and daddy did during the war. And suddenly they're all phoning in going, what the hell? We've been lied to. I can't talk to my mom anymore. I can't talk to my dad. I can't look him in the eyes. Lied to, lied to, lied to, lied to. And they're trying to explain it. And this German lady, she would walk home. She was a sturdy German woman. I think at that time she was probably in her 60s. But when the weather got bad, we would drive her because we didn't want a sturdy old lady walking home. And so she would reluctantly accept the ride. And so we're driving back to her place, and she's very silent. And my dad, he spoke a little bit of German. He said, what's wrong? Are you okay? She said, this Holocaust show. I'm like, yeah, it's tough. It's tough. She goes, why won't the Jews just leave us alone? Why don't the Jews just leave us alone? We should have finished the job. And we're like, whoa. Scratch a German, you get a Nazi. That's my point. Scratch a German, you get a Nazi. They're trying to suppress it, but at the end of the day, there's a reason why Germany so willingly went into the business of killing Jews. Because you had to be deaf, dumb, and blind not to know that it was happening. And a lot of Germans who say, I didn't kill any Jews. Maybe you didn't. But you know what? Your silence did. The fact that you sat there and let it happen. And I'm not talking about once the Nazis were totally in control, the concentration camps running up and all that stuff. I'm talking about on Kristallnacht, when they started knocking the glass. Why didn't you go in the street, grab a Nazi, pound him into the sand and say, not in my street, buddy, not in my Germany. It doesn't happen that way. But you didn't. Shut your mouth, you close your eyes, you move to the side. You forgot that it was happening. As they dragged the Jews out. You forgot, so you made them put yellow stars on instead of going around and handing out yellow stars to every German. Everybody put it on. I believe the Danes did. I think the Danish king put a yellow star on because he said, we're all Jews. And you know what happened? The Germans sort of backed down. So instead of doing that, instead of Germany growing a pair, they let it happen. So we didn't get rid of the Nazis in West Germany because we needed West Germany to confront the Russians. And the Russians were always nervous about this. If you go back to 1990 and 1989 with the dissolution of the fall of the Berlin Wall, Mikhail Gorbachev was like, we're not too certain we're happy with this unified Germany thing because there's some problems over there. And we're a little nervous about you talking about bringing it into NATO. We don't want NATO troops there because we're concerned about the motivations here. And they were promised not an inch eastward. It was a lie. But Germany has never purged itself of Nazi influence. And this is why you have people like Ursula von der Leyen. I think it was her grandfather was a major league Nazi in Ukraine, by the way. They're all Nazis. Now, the sins of the father should not be inherited by the children, especially the grandchildren. I'll be the first one to admit that, unless the grandchildren are in the business of whitewashing the sins of the father, like Chrystia Freeland is with her grandfather, like Ursula von der Leyen with her grandfather, like every German is with their grandfather. But they aren't walking away from this. They're past. And you're starting to see it starting to get watered down. I mean, damn, even Netanyahu got into the business of this lately. You saw what he said about, Hitler didn't want to kill the Jews. What? Hitler, did you read Mein Kampf? No, 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 no. Hitler was influenced by this Muslim cleric in Jerusalem who came in and said, kill them all there or else they'll come here. And so Hitler killed the Jews because the Arabs asked him. Sickness of Netanyahu. But it's the fact that even the Jews of Israel, a nation that was born from the ashes of the Holocaust, where never again should be literally ingrained in the DNA of everybody, starting to rewrite history for their own political benefit. Everybody's rewriting history right now. All you people in there that talk about Ukraine not being Nazi, you're rewriting history. Learn about the Banderas. Learn about the fate of the Nazis afterwards. Learn about the Gehlen organization. Learn about everything that happened as we preserved the Germans who were the heart and soul of the Nazi regime, and we kept them alive to serve us in our effort to go against the Soviet Union. And today we are willing to re-embrace these people to confront Russia. There's only one nation that's pure in its anti-Nazi sentiment. That's Russia.
You are very right about rewriting history books. Because now when we have such a big Ukrainian population in Poland, I just wonder how that story about Wołyń will be presented in the history classes. I just wonder, because they're gonna, you know, they're teaching different things. And as I've heard, I haven't seen the books, I've heard they are teaching different history in Ukraine than we have in Poland. This will be quite challenging now, right? How you present this.
Well, for instance, I know in Ukraine, first of all, let's just say that it's very complicated. In one way, it's very simple, but another way, because at the same time that the Banderas were killing Poles, killed 110,000 of them, Poles were killing Western Ukrainians. I think 20 to 30,000 Western Ukrainians were killed by Poles. So once you start the business of killing, it doesn't stop, and both sides are guilty of the sin. So what's happening right now in Western Ukraine is they're trying to minimize the number of Poles that were killed. I think right now one of the revisionist figures is only 10,000 were killed, but we lost 20 to 30,000 at the hands of the bloodthirsty Poles, and that's how the Western Ukrainians are spinning Volyn right now, to maximize Polish atrocities, minimize Banderist atrocities.
Yes, I had this question here, and to be honest, I cannot answer this because I really don't know. Who can answer this? Will Poland enter Ukraine? Who can really answer this? We don't know. None of us really knows. None of us knows. And I don't even, to be honest, I don't even think it will be unfolding like this. Scott, do you want to address this question?
Yeah, let me put it this way. This is the perspective of the West. The West has basically fumbled this football. I don't know if that's a term that Europeans understand, but in American football, it means you made a big mistake. You fumbled the football. The West, in choosing to go to war against Russia, using Ukraine as a proxy, has made a huge mistake. And now they're desperate to get out of it. But, you know, here's the thing. The West still thinks they're in charge. The West still thinks they have a vote that they can influence. And that whole question was premised on the notion that Poland is going to be able to negotiate with Russia together with these other European nations to come up with a solution that benefits Poland and these other nations. Do they not understand that Russia doesn't give a damn anymore? All those people out there that said, we need to kill Russians because they don't care about Ukrainian laws, but we need to kill Russians. We need to kill Russians. We need to kill Russians. Well, you killed some Russians. You killed too many Russians. Russia never forgets. They may forgive you at some point, but they never forget. Too many Russian mothers have put their sons into the ground. Too many Russian wives are raising children alone. You're going to sit there and say, well, what about the Ukrainians? They started this war. They wanted this war. They were pushed into continuation of this war. My heart goes out to the Ukrainian families that lost people, but they brought it upon themselves. Russia did not want this war, did not need this war. This war could have ended on 1 April. There could have been a peace treaty signed on that day. But no, the West, including Poland, encouraged Ukraine to continue. And so now what's happened is the Russians will not stop this war until they have won this war. want it on their terms. There will be no negotiation, not one that comes from Poland, not one that comes from Romania or Hungary, not one that comes from anybody in the West. The only negotiation will be what we talked about earlier, Anya, where Russia will put up a table, down a piece of paper, and tell whatever represents the Ukrainian government, forward, stop, look down, read it, pick up the pen, sign it, step back, about face, leave, you're done, it's over, lost. That's how this war ends. It doesn't end any other way. Then the West is going to turn to Russia, and Russia's going to say, now, can we talk about a new European security framework, one where you respect our sphere of influence? Stop talking about Ukraine, because the Ukraine you knew doesn't exist anymore. That's how this war ends.
Scott, so that means to me Europe will be completely sacrificed.
Europe's
I just had this like flashback.
It's sacrificing itself. I mean, it's not that Russia's trying to sacrifice Europe. Europe's sacrificing itself. They're falling. They're falling on the Ukrainian sword. It's insane.
It's insane. Absolutely. Question completely from a different direction, however, connected to the United States. If someone just is like waking up to the nightmare we are living in, but they are still believing that there is a threat coming from the outside to the United States. Question is simple. Is there any country that is a real threat to the United States? And if yes, what kind of threat is it?
There is one country that's a huge threat to the United States, and it's an existential threat. This country poses a threat to the Constitution of the United States. It poses a threat to the health and welfare of every American. It's a very frightening country. It's called the United States of America. The United States of America is the only threat to the United States of America. There's nobody else in the world that threatens us. We hype the threat up. We hype problems up. We are the greatest threat to us. There's only one nation capable of destroying the Constitution of the United States, and that's the United States. There's only one nation capable of enslaving the entire American people, and that's the United States. And we're doing that as we speak. I mean, this current election cycle that's taking place in America is literally the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen in my 62 years on this planet. And I've seen some pretty embarrassing things. I mean, I was a child during Watergate, but that was humiliating. I'll tell you why it was humiliating, because my dad was a hardcore Nixon supporter. Hardcore. He was a Republican through and through, but he was a Republican who believed in America. He believed when the president spoke, he believed the president, because that's what you were trained to do as a child. You trust the president. You trust and Watergate, I mean, it ripped the soul out of my parents, because these are adults, and I'm watching adults suddenly, and it's tough for a child at the time too. You know, I was, 12 years old, and I'm watching my parents just beside themselves. This is a man who, and a woman. My mom was a Air Force officer before she had an injury she had to retire. But these are people who believed in service. They had sacrificed everything. They raised a family under the conditions of service to the country. He had gone to Vietnam. He had gone to Korea. He had gone to Turkey. And suddenly it's like Watergate, the lies. And it was just like, boom. So that was a difficult time. And then to watch, I was cognizant of the economic malaise that struck America in the 70s. I mean, I was alive during the Arab oil embargo. I know what it meant every other day, or even odd numbers on your license plate to line up in a gas line and wait so you could go in and get gas in your car. As an American, that's humiliating. We are the nation of the Camaro. We are the nation of the Monte Carlo. We are the nation of Ford, Chevrolet. I mean, we make cars, the Mustang, baby. Come on. And we have to wait in line to get gas. How humiliating is that? And I watched Jimmy Carter give his speech with the sweater on about turning down the thermostat. And an American, you're like, we don't turn down the thermostat. We're Americans. Our life is good because we're a great nation. We don't do all this crap. What are you talking about? So I've lived through Ronald Reagan. I mean, Bozo putting a wreath on Bitburg Cemetery where Nazis are buried. Come on, man. That's stupid. But I also lived through America being great, America recovering, America rebuilding itself. And I, too, like my mom and dad, grew up with faith in my country, sort of a faith that wasn't as pure as theirs. Theirs was a pure faith. Mine was sort of like, Yeah, we make some mistakes, but I believe that we're trying to do the right thing. I believe in the effort. And I take a look at what's happening today. This is embarrassing on a scope and scale beyond imagination. Look, I believe a lot of what's happening to Donald Trump is politically motivated. There's no doubt about that. But a lot of what's happening to Donald Trump is because Donald Trump is Donald Trump. All right. He is who he is. And he shouldn't be president. And yet the Republican Party is going to nominate this guy as their president, as their candidate for president. Joe Biden shouldn't be president. I mean, whatever you think about his political beliefs, we shouldn't have a senile man as president. He can't even think anymore. And that makes you wonder who the hell's writing his speeches? Who the hell's dictating things to him? It ain't him. And I didn't vote for whoever. I didn't vote for him anyways, but the American people didn't vote for him.
Obama is dictating.
But we didn't vote for that. That's not the way America's supposed to work. We're not supposed to have the secret hidden hand. Look at the Republicans that are out there last night on stage, a group of jokers. And who did the Democrats have? They're going to they're going to sneak it in on the side. I think everybody knows what's going to happen. Biden's going to go through the nominating process, and at the last second, they're going to say he can't run for election. But Gavin Newsom will be put in, but he'll have to skip the primary. He'll just be inserted, and then it'll be Newsom versus Trump or whomever they've come up with. This is a nation of 320 million people, and that's what we did. Trickery, incompetence, criminality, all brought together to be the leader of the greatest nation in the world, except we're not the greatest nation in the world. We could be if we tried, if we wanted to be, but apparently we don't want to be. This is an embarrassment, just literal embarrassment. I am humiliated about what is happening in my country today. And this election there's only one candidate out there, and I hate to say his name because then, people will take their hatred for me and project it onto him. But hey, people who hate me, screw you. I don't care. Bobby Kennedy Jr. He's the one candidate out there that has some fresh ideas. I know a lot of people are against him for his vaccine stance. A lot of people are angry at him because of Israel. There's no perfect person out there. Bobby Kennedy Jr. ain't Donald Trump and he ain't Joe Biden. He's a man who has a brain. Listen to him talk. He's thinking. You may not agree with his conclusions, but at least you have to acknowledge that there's a thought process there. And one can hope that as he elevates himself, if he became president, he would surround himself with people who would give him good advice. And he would make a decision based upon what's good for America, not what's good for the Trump organization or for Biden, Murder Incorporated, because he is literally at the head of a crime family. Bobby Kennedy Jr. would be pure. The fact that every Kennedy out there is against him proves to you that this is not just a continuation of Kennedy, family tree, that this is a breath of new, fresh air. But there should be more Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s. We should have a whole slate. Why can't we, a nation of 320 million people, put young, vibrant people with fresh ideas out there? Because the system doesn't allow it. We destroy it. They're going to kill Bobby Kennedy Jr. if he's not careful. You saw what happened in Los Angeles, where that guy was able to dress up as a U.S. Marshal and get close to him. Biden won't give Bobby Kennedy Jr. Secret Service protection. Why? Because he wants him dead. He wants him out of the way. This is America. This ain't the land of the free and the home of the brave anymore. This is a criminal enterprise populated by criminality of all stripes. We have greed in Trump. We have corruption with Biden. I mean, if what they're saying about Biden is half true, that he took money, and it appears the evidence is that he did, bribes while he was sitting as a senator, as vice president, that's the kind of stuff you should be shot for. Now, I can't say that because he's the president of the United States. I'll have the Secret Service kicking down my door. So I am not encouraging this to happen. But I am encouraging the rule of law to take place and for people to be held accountable for the crimes they committed. And why are we pushing these people? We are a fundamentally broken country today. I just have to walk down the street. We just saw it today. I drove my wife to work today. The homeless. It was a cold morning today. The temperatures, it got down into the low 40s last night. So it's beginning to get crisp. And the homeless are out there. And normally they sort of camp out in these open air with cardboard boxes and tents, but it's too cold for that now. So they're huddled. As you drive in, you have the state administrative buildings, and they're all huddled in the in the doorways there together, getting 3 or 4 bodies together to get their warmth together. So the people that go to work have to step over the homeless to get into their office, or the cops will come around and shoo them away. But why are there so many homeless here? Why do I have to go down Clinton Avenue and look into the alleys and see the drug addicts and the alcoholics slumped down, shooting up? Why is this? Why is Clinton Avenue all boarded up? Why are half the apartments uninhabitable? Why doesn't the fire department respond in time to the buildings burning down there? Why does it take an ambulance 5 times longer to respond to a black victim than it does to a white victim in a part of town that pays taxes? The inequities of this society are there, evident to everybody. The crumbling infrastructure, the crumbling society. And yet we're going to elect the same people who gave this to us. No fresh ideas, no solutions, just continuation of the problems. And we have the audacity to point a finger at Russia and say, you're bad. I just came from Russia. They didn't have any of these problems, not manifested in the way that I saw. You were in Russia. I'm not going to sit here and say Russia's perfect. I'm not going to say that Russia was the Garden of Eden, but it was pretty damn close, especially when compared to what's going on in this country right now. So I just think that America's got to get off of its high horse. We got to fall back, take care of ourselves, heal ourselves, fix ourselves, put ourselves in a good place, and then we can go amongst the world and talk about, how we think the rest of the community should look. But we can't sit there and look at the neighbor and say that's the wrong color paint on your house when our house is falling
down. 100%. And you just said this. There's a proverb I often repeat, Scott. I think it's African proverb that says, if there is no enemy within, no enemy without can do any harm. And this is exactly what's happening. Is the enemy within projecting that there is enemy without that can do harm. One more question I have about United Nations and General Assembly and the meetings and speeches there. I just wonder, when that weekend was happening and those leaders and diplomats gathered and they gave, like Sergei Lavrov, the one and only, the best diplomat in the world, gave the speech. Does those speeches actually make any difference? Does UN have any influence on peace around the world?
Well, let me put it this way. If you live in the West, the speeches mean nothing. One of the reasons why is that we condition ourselves to our politicians meaning nothing. I mean, if what you're saying about the Polish elections is true, nothing that's being told to the Polish people by these politicians is an accurate reflection of reality. In America, we know that's true. If a politician's lips are moving, he or she is lying. We also have a tendency to be very dismissive of what's collectively known as the global South. Those poor heathens that live in those mud huts with the thatched roofs in Africa and in Asia, and those lesser beings in India and all that. We just don't think they can think that but there's a whole world out there where words mean something, where people listen to what people say, and they take actions based upon those words. So when Lavrov speaks, in the West, we tend to be dismissive of his words. I can tell you that in Africa, they're not. They're listening to every word he says. The Chinese are listening to every word he says. Everybody in Asia is listening to every word he says. The smart people in Europe are listening to every word he says because every word he says has meaning. Words have meaning. The Russians believe in this. And so when he speaks, it's not to score cheap political points at home. Trust me, when the American president speaks, he's speaking to an American audience. He's not speaking, he's saying things that, the mainstream media will pick out a handful of things and throw it out there, but it's almost like a campaign speech. But the rest of the world has learned a long time ago, when America speaks, it doesn't act. These words are empty. It used to be when an American president could go up before the United Nations and open his mouth and speak, and the world sat there and listened. Because at that time, the speech was written by policymakers that were linked to the State Department, and the words were linked to policy, and the State Department then act on that policy. So people want to know, what's America going to do? They listen to the president, the policy is reflected. We have presidents that's just empty words. To show you what I mean by empty words, Biden was just at the G20 in India. And he did a press conference there, and they announced the India Middle East Economic Corridor. Big project, huge project, sort of flagship project. It's part of this whole development program that the United States put in place a couple years ago at the G7, where we're going to lead the world and develop. Well, we can't lead the world because China for the last decade has spent $7 trillion, $7 to $10 trillion on their Belts and Roads Initiative, but we're going to challenge the Chinese, their Belts and Roads Initiative. So he says all these things about, we're going to have connectivity, we're going to have clean energy, we're going to do all this. It all looked great on the PowerPoint plan or on the speech. It looked great. But then at the end, they said, this is just a concept. It means nothing. Nobody's politically attached to this, and we'll work it out in 60 days, which means it'll never get worked out. But think about what he was saying. A India Middle East economic corridor to challenge the Belts and Roads Initiative. Let's start with the port of Mumbai, where this is all going to start. Well, the port's been pretty much developed by the Indians. It's one of the major ports they have. So what exactly is Biden going to do in Mumbai? Nothing. They're just going to put containers on ships. All right, but now that's India. Where are they going next? Middle East. Up around, they get off at Dubai. But Dubai is already a big port. Big port. It receives container ships all the time. So what have you done now, Biden, to enhance? Where's this plan going? Wait a minute. There's a rail line that connects Dubai in the United Arab Emirates through Saudi Arabia up to Jordan, of all places, and across to Israel to the port of Haifa. Let's dissect that for a minute. One, the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, has been trying to build a connective rail line between countries for about 7 years now. It hasn't gotten anywhere, but Biden suddenly, by saying something, is going to make it happen. Two, who builds the railroads in the United Arab Emirates? China. Who builds the railroads in Saudi Arabia? China. As part of what? Belts and Roads Initiative. So we're now going to upgrade the Chinese railroads in UAE and in Saudi Arabia. Okay, who are they going to contract with? China. So we have a plan to challenge the Belts and Roads Initiative that has us investing money in the countries so they can pay the Chinese to do what the Chinese are already doing. How stupid is that? Pretty stupid. Now they take it up to the port of Haifa in Israel. Let's just assume they can get across Jordan, which they may not be able to do. Let's assume that Israel and Saudi Arabia learn to work together, which they probably won't be able to do because of Palestine. They get to Haifa. Haifa became a big port. Why? $1.7 billion investment by China. You guessed it. China rebuilt the Haifa port. So we're going to go on Chinese railroads to a Chinese port in Haifa, put it on Chinese shipping that's going to go to a Greek port, the largest port in Greece, I think it's Piraeus, which just went through a $600 million refurbishment by China. I hope everybody understands what I just said here, that Joe Biden is an empty suit, that words out of his mouth are hot air, that the United States stands for nothing. When you dissect what he just did with the India Middle East Economic Corridor, it's a joke. The Chinese have already been there and done that. Whatever the Chinese equivalent of Kilroy was here, during World War II, when American troops went someplace, they would write Kilroy was here. There was the graffiti all over Europe. There has to be a Chinese equivalent where they go in and they stencil, Xing Pao is here or something like that, because China's been there before us. They're doing it right. We're not doing it. We're playing catch up and we can't even do it right. America's a joke, literally a joke. This is embarrassing, humiliating. And yet this is the president of the United States going out there with a flagship development project. Crazy.
Scott, I am speechless today.
Well, I apologize for that.
I am. No. It's just because it's a mess. It's absolutely a mess. So we're gonna have elections in Poland. You're gonna have your elections next year, and what happens in between, God only knows.
Well, what's going to happen in between is Russia. Please, people, don't ignore Russia. I know you live in the West and you're told not to pay attention. Russia, right now in the West, what tends to happen in the lead up to elections is everything freezes because we're waiting for the election. Russia ain't frozen. Russia's doing things. Russia's living. Russia's breathing. it's a nation full of Russians who are good people for the most part. And I would just invite everybody to follow in the steps of Anya. If you want to follow my steps, go ahead. Follow in the steps of Van Cliburn, that great Texan musician who in 1958 went to Moscow, entered the Tchaikovsky Music Festival and won it, came in first place. Won the hearts of the Russian people, came back to the United States to a ticker tape parade and opened up the beginning of cultural exchanges. At the height of problems between the United States and the Soviet Union, we sent, I forget, who was the jazz musician? I want to say Benny Goodman, but I'm sure I'm probably wrong on that. That might be a comedian. But we sent a jazz musician who was considered to be, Dizzy Gillespie. And the communists said, he is a decadent, American, perversion and all that stuff. And all the Russian kids are going, yeah, but baby, we want to swing. And they brought Dizzy Gillespie over, and he played concert after concert after concert, and he broke down barriers. There was a composer, Leonard Bernstein, a famous American composer and conductor. He went over to Russia and conducted music. And the last piece he conducted was Shostakovich's Fifth. And if you know anything about Shostakovich, he had fallen under hard times. The Soviets were sort of pushing him aside, ideologically wrong. And Bernstein conducted the Fifth in front of an audience that was so receptive to it. Culture tears down walls of ignorance and walls of hatred. And you don't have to get involved in politics. You don't have to go over and engage in deep political debates about this, that, and the other thing. Go over to Russia. Sit down with the Russians. Listen to some music. Go to the Bolshoi Theater. Watch some theater. Just talk to the average Russian. They are cultured. Rap is our culture. I'll tell you what. You know who can rap? Shaman can rap. Now everybody looks at him as the guy who's singing Ya Ruski and all this kind of stuff. In his heart, he's a rapper. Rap doesn't have to be bad. It has to be from the heart. And there are Russian rappers out there because Russia has a lot of issues that are still working out. And rap music, hip hop music is a means of expressing that. There's Russian folk artists who are the equivalent of Bob Dylan. Go there, meet these people, learn about them, invite them to come to our country and learn about us. And while we're doing that, we're waging peace. We're doing better than our government, because our government only wants conflict, only wants hate, only wants war. And we, the people of the United States, you, the people of Europe, you should be looking for peace. And you know who wants peace? The Russian people want peace. Every day they pray for peace. So why don't we help them? Why don't we go over there and extend a hand of friendship, shake their hands, sit down with them, talk to them as equals, talk to them with respect, give them an opportunity to show you their culture, take you to the Hermitage, take you to the various, just go on a tour of the Moscow subway system, because it is a living museum built during the Soviet period of Stalin. It is beautiful. It was built with art in mind. There are statues, there are mosaics. Just do a tour of the subway system and you'll be amazed. I mean, I tell you what, do that and then go to New York City and try and take the D train, and you'll see there's a huge difference between the two. But, it doesn't mean that you have to surrender your culture or your heritage. Please don't. Every time I go to Russia, I've been once, I'm going again. I come as a proud American, and I talk about my country. I talk about my history. I talk about the culture of my nation. And we treat each other as equals. I learn about them. They learn about me. And at the end of the day, we're both stronger from it. So let's not allow this cycle that's been defined by politicians and the mainstream media to take us hostage. Be your own Van Cliburn. Be your own Anya Kay. And if you want to, be your own Scott Ritter. Go to Russia, meet the Russians, and I think the world will be a better place for it.
So beautiful. And we could end here, but I want to share one more thing with you and the audience, because you just reminded me of this. And thank you so much for saying all of that, Scott. When you speak like this, it reminds me that my main mission with all those trips that I took to Moscow, especially, that was to be that bridge, to be that regular person who comes from Poland and says that I love this country, I love Russia, I love the culture, the people, I like the energy. And art connects us all. Food can connect us all. Looking in someone's eyes and feeling the emotions of another person can connect us all. And I was absolutely honored to be in Bolshoi. This was my first time to went to see the performance. And I was standing in the line. I didn't share it with the audience. I was standing in the line showing the ticket, and the lady was about to tell me which way to go, where is my seat. And she asked me, where are you from? And I hesitated again, because I know how our politicians are acting is not the most friendly way at all. And I said, I'm from Poland. And Scott, the reaction I got from this lady was unbelievable. She literally stopped the whole line behind me, and she was telling me how much she loves Polish people. When she was in Poland, she had the most incredible experience, actually understood most of what she was saying. And she just loved Poland. And I could see that was coming out, was bursting out from her soul. I was so moved by this. I wasn't expecting this, but you never know. This is the whole point. When you connect with people, you never know. You will meet people, who will love your country and will appreciate you, and they look beyond the politics, and that's what matters. So I just wanted to share with you, because I know you've been to Bolshoi yourself, and it's incredible experience, and that's what I want to say.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I'm not going to up that story because you can't. That's a great story, but I'll just say that I think anybody who travels to Russia will have a similar experience. The moment you tell them where you're from, you find that there's a deep love for you, for your nation, for your culture, for your history. I just wish we could return them the favor.
Yes. Thank you so much, Scott, for joining me today. I want to thank everyone who was watching us and participated in this conversation. And yeah, just to make sure you check the links to Scott and follow him, because he's back on the platforms as well. And if you enjoy this conversation and you find the value, if you see the value, I hope you do, please share it. And until next time, everyone, lots of love to all of you, and be safe.
Thanks.